Greetings, weary traveler, and welcome back to the quiet hearth where ancient tales are spun. Do you ever feel like history's most exciting stories are locked away, hidden behind dusty textbooks and boring lectures? Tonight we get to experience them firsthand, visiting a regular tavern and exploring all the temperaments within. Before we part ways on this journey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It would be most interesting to see all the corners of the world from which you gather. Now, with lights low and blankets near, let's gently wander into tonight's story. You step through the rough wooden door, and a wall of noise and scent slams into you, not gently, but with the force of a market brawl. This isn't just a building, it's a living, breathing beast, a heart thrumming with raw medieval life. The air is thick with smoke from the central hearth, the sharp tang of stale ale, and the less than subtle perfume of unwashed bodies. Your eyes immediately scan the room, trying to make sense of the controlled chaos. Every shadow seems to hold a secret, every boisterous laugh a potential threat. This is a tavern, yes, but not the cozy, picturesque kind from ballads. This is a vital, high-stakes gathering point where fortunes could be made or lost in the blink of an eye, and a wrong word could earn you a sharp reminder of medieval justice. The wooden tables are scarred with centuries of spilled drinks and desperate knife marks. Benches are haphazardly thrown around, some overturned from a recent argument or simply the sheer exuberance of a Friday night. The floor, a mix of packed earth and old rushes, is slippery with spilled drinks and goodness knows what else, forcing you to watch every step or risk an undignified slide into a stranger's lap. High above, rough-hewn beams disappear into the smoke, their surfaces blackened by countless fires and the lingering scent of last week's roasted meat. This isn't interior design, it's basic function. No frills, no fancy glass windows, just small, shuttered openings that do little to keep out the chill or the watchful eyes of the outside world. Light is a luxury provided mainly by the central fire, supplemented by a few sputtering tallow candles that flicker like tired eyes, casting dancing shadows that make every movement seem more dramatic than it is. The atmosphere crackles with a frantic energy. It's a place where time moves differently. A sudden argument erupts near the bar, quickly muffled by the roar of conversations, the clatter of tankards, and the thud of dice hitting a table. You notice a group of soldiers, their rough wool cloaks draped over benches, their laughter too loud, their eyes too keen as they eye newcomers. Next to them, a lone merchant, his face etched with the weariness of a long journey, haggles quietly over the price of a small parcel of spices. Even the animals, a scruffy dog gnawing on a bone under a table, and a couple of chickens pecking at stray crumbs, seem to move with a heightened sense of purpose, always on the lookout for a dropped morsel or an open door. It's a constant dance of quick observations and quicker reactions, a survival strategy honed by the unforgiving rhythm of medieval life. You realize quickly that this isn't a place to relax, it's a place to act, to make a deal, to gather a rumor, or to simply not get noticed, all within the frantic heartbeat of the tavern. The tavern's architecture isn't just about shelter. It's a strategic stage for the constant drama unfolding within its walls. You notice immediately that the space is designed for flow and quick movement, yet it's also full of potential traps and choke points. The entrance, typically a single heavy wooden door, acts like a valve, either letting in a sudden gust of cold air and a new face, or slamming shut with a finality that suggests secrets kept within. The main room, or common room, is almost always open concept, a single, sprawling area where everyone from the lowliest stable hand to the occasional minor noble might rub shoulders, literally, given the crowded conditions. There are no private booths here, no quiet corners for clandestine meetings, not really. Every conversation is a public performance, every transaction a potential spectacle. The rough wooden tables and benches are heavy, built to withstand not just the weight of patrons and their endless rounds of ale, but also the occasional impromptu brawl that might erupt without warning. Imagine trying to escape a quickly escalating argument when you're pinned between a solid oak bench and a wall of shouting, sweating bodies. These aren't dainty furniture pieces, they're tactical obstacles. You see how easily a spilled drink can turn the already trodden floor into a slick trap, perfect for an unexpected fall or a hasty retreat. It's a space where vigilance is key, and spatial awareness is a survival skill. You learn quickly that standing too close to the door means you're first out, or first in line for trouble. Standing too far from the hearth means you're always cold, but at least you avoid the errant sparks. The lack of real windows adds to the oppressive, enclosed feel, making the interior feel like a murky cave. Tiny, shuttered holes, usually covered with greased animal hide or thin cloth, let in only slivers of light, creating an atmosphere that is perpetually dim and secretive. This dimness isn't just a side effect, it's a feature. It makes faces harder to read, quick movements less visible, and secrets easier to whisper without being fully seen. It's a constant, low-level visual challenge, forcing you to rely on other senses, a skill often honed by those who navigate the treacherous paths of medieval life. You squint, trying to discern the details of a face across the room, only for a sudden burst of flame from the hearth to reveal a fleeting, unsettling grin. It's almost as if the tavern itself is playing a game with you, revealing and concealing truths with its shifting light. The central hearth, a rough pit of stones, is a lifeline, but also a hazard. It provides the only real warmth in the perpetually drafty room, but the smoke it belches fills the air, burning your eyes and clinging to your clothes. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that often lets in more cold air than it lets out smoke. It's a clumsy, inefficient system, but it's all there is, and people huddle around it like moths to a dangerous flame, vying for the small circle of warmth it offers. The light from the fire, however, is a chaotic flicker, making shadows dance and faces shift. One moment you see a friendly face, the next it's contorted into something grim by the erratic light. You learn not to trust what you see entirely, but rather what you hear and sense. Every element of this architecture, from the rough wooden beams overhead to the damp, uneven floor beneath your feet, screams of a life lived on the edge, where even the most mundane setting could become a stage for sudden, high-stakes drama. It's a place that forces you to be ready for anything, because in a medieval tavern, anything can happen, and often does. The sounds and smells of a medieval tavern hit you like a physical blow, a sensory assault that demands immediate attention. It's a roaring storm of noise, a constant, overlapping cacophony that makes polite conversation nearly impossible and demands a sharp ear for anything truly important. The dominant sound is the clatter of wooden tankards, echoing off the low ceiling as they're slammed onto scarred tables, either in triumph after a winning dice roll or in frustration after a loss. Beneath this, a constant, low rumble of voices, 100 conversations happening at once, some hushed and secretive, others booming with drunken bravado. You can pick out the sharp crack of dice being thrown, the occasional thud of a fist hitting wood, or the sudden, high-pitched squeal of a dog underfoot. Every now and then, a burst of raucous laughter erupts, quickly swallowed by the surrounding din, only to be replaced by the strained notes of a lute being clumsily played in a corner by someone who clearly prefers strong alto musical talent. The air is thick, a heavy, suffocating blanket of odors that cling to your clothes and invade your nostrils. First, there's the overwhelming stench of stale ale, spilled countless times and absorbed into the very fabric of the wooden tables and the dirt floor. It's a cloying, slightly sour smell that mingles with the sharp, acrid scent of wood smoke belching from the central hearth, burning your eyes and making them water. Then comes the human element, the pungent smell of unwashed bodies, a mix of sweat, damp wool, and the lingering aroma of whatever livestock happened to share their home before they arrived. It's a raw, earthy smell, completely devoid of any modern pleasantries, a reminder that hygiene isn't exactly a top priority in this era. Imagine trying to decipher a whispered secret through a haze of smoke and the scent of a dozen unbathed patrons. It truly heightens your other senses. Beyond the immediate human and ale-based fragrances, there are subtle, often unsettling, background notes. The faint, sweet, sickly smell of something vaguely rotten, perhaps a forgotten scrap of food under a bench, or the lingering scent of damp rushes that haven't been changed in weeks, or perhaps even months. There might be a whiff of singed hair if someone gets too close to the open flame, or the sharp, metallic tang of spilled blood if an argument escalates beyond mere words. It's a place where every breath tells a story, and often that story involves hard living and questionable choices. You notice how the innkeeper, moving through this sensory maelstrom, seems completely immune to it all. His face a mask of practiced indifference, a silent testament to the sheer volume of chaotic noise and potent smells he endures nightly. It almost makes you want to offer him a prize for best medieval air freshener, if such a thing existed, which, judging by the general aroma, it most certainly does not. This is a space where your nose and ears are as vital as your eyes, constantly processing information, constantly on high alert for anything that might signal a shift from boisterous revelry to outright danger. Ale, in the medieval tavern, wasn't just a drink, it was the lifeblood, the currency, and often the silent instigator of every quick temper and risky gamble that unfolded within those smoky walls. Forget pure water, that was teeming with parasites and filth, a guaranteed ticket to a week of hacking up what felt like your soul. So, you drank ale. Lots of it. Even children drank it. Not the strong stuff, mind you, but small beer, weak in alcohol, yet strong in its primary function, survival. Brewing involved boiling the water, making it infinitely safer than the murky, disease-ridden streams or communal ditches that served as the local water supply. Imagine the scene: a man slams his tankard down, the wooden vessel echoing the frustration of a losing dice roll, and immediately another is filled and thrust into his hand by a scruffy serving wench, a silent agreement to drown his sorrows and try again. The ale flowed constantly, not just to quench thirst, but to loosen tongues, dull the biting cold, and blur the harsh edges of a relentlessly difficult life. It was the lubricant of medieval social interaction, turning strangers into temporary confidantes and rivals into reluctant drinking buddies. A few gulps of the weak brew, and a quiet merchant might find the courage to loudly boast about a rare silk shipment he recently acquired, perhaps revealing too much information to the watchful eyes and ears of a lurking bandit, who now suddenly finds the ale much more interesting. The constant flow of ale also served a more practical purpose. It fueled the quick, often explosive, shifts in mood that characterized tavern life. One moment, everyone is roaring with laughter, clinking tankards in a shared moment of drunken camaraderie. The next, a misplaced elbow or a muttered insult, amplified by the alcohol, could ignite a furious exchange. You see it happen often: a sudden hush, a sharp gasp, and then the scrape of a bench as two men stand face to face, eyes narrowed, hands hovering near daggers. The ale didn't just warm their bellies, it warmed their tempers, making them quicker to aggression and slower to reason. It turned minor disagreements into dramatic standoffs, and a few pints too many might see a simple game of backgammon transform into a full-blown fistfight over perceived cheating, ending with a cascade of overturned benches and a few bruised egos. For travelers and traders, all was a necessary evil. It dulled the ache of long journeys, offered a temporary escape from the constant threat of the road, and sometimes, ironically, made them more vulnerable. You see a road-worn soldier, his face grimmed with dust, gratefully downing a tankard. He knows it blurs his senses, but he also knows it's the only safe liquid, and the only way to momentarily forget the miles and the dangers that still lie ahead. It's a calculated risk, trading a clear head for a moment of hazy comfort. The innkeeper, meanwhile, watched it all with a shrewd eye, knowing that every tankard poured was not just coin earned, but potential trouble brewing. He'd seen it all before: the quiet man who suddenly became a brawler, the loudmouth who dissolved into maudlin tears, all under the influence of the ever-present owl. It was the essential backdrop to every interaction, every deal, and every sudden outburst, making it the most significant, and often most dangerous, liquid in the medieval world. The food served in these medieval taverns was less about culinary delight and more about quick sustenance, a gritty fuel for bodies constantly on the move or bracing for confrontation. This wasn't a place for leisurely dining, it was a pit stop, a refueling station where efficiency trumped flavor every single time. Imagine thick, gloopy stews, often made from whatever root vegetables were available, like turnips and onions, perhaps with some grains thrown in for bulk. This pottage, as it was called, simmered for days, even weeks, in the same pot, with new ingredients simply dumped on top of the old. It was less a dish and more a continuous, vaguely brown, edible experiment, designed to sit in your gut like a friendly brick, providing slow, burning warmth through a cold night. Alongside this unappetizing concoction, you'd find hunks of bread so hard and dense they could probably deflect a stray arrow. Made from coarse rye or barley flour, it was often bulked up with sawdust, ground acorns, or other creative fillers, because wheat was a luxury for the rich. This wasn't bread you sliced, it was bread you negotiated with, often requiring serious jaw strength just to get a bite down. You'd likely tear off a piece, dip it in your pottage to soften it slightly, and chew with a grim determination, knowing this was your primary source of calories for the long day ahead. There were no delicate presentations or artisanal garnishes. This was simply sustenance, raw and unapologetic. Meat was a rare treat, usually reserved for Sundays, feast days, or if the local lord was feeling uncharacteristically generous. For most peasants, consuming meat more than a few times a year was unheard of. Even then, it would be salted or dried, tough and chewy, designed to preserve rather than delight. Fresh fruit was seasonal and spoiled quickly, and spices like pepper or cinnamon were worth more than gold, locked away in the lord's pantry. The average meal tasted like wet burlap seasoned with salt, if you were lucky, and a pervasive sense of sadness. It was enough to make you long for the simpler, yet equally questionable, flavors of home, where at least you knew what questionable ingredients were in your own pottage. Despite the lack of gourmet appeal, every bite was a calculated risk. Food preservation was rudimentary. No fridges, no freezers, just salt, smoke, and a prayer that the winter air would keep things fresh. Meat hung for days, exposed to flies and marinated in questionable brine, often shared with rats. Even bread had its dangers in bad harvest years. Desperate peasants would bulk it up with bark or clay, and if it was rye, there was the added risk of ergot, a fungus causing convulsions and hallucinations. It was like eating bread laced with tetanus and a bad trip, all at once. So, as you ate your gritty bread and gulped your ale, you couldn't help but wonder if this meal, designed to keep you alive, might also be the one that finally did you in. Every meal was a test, a gamble, and a grim reminder that in the medieval tavern, even the simple act of eating was an adventure. The medieval tavern was a swirling vortex where social classes collided, not always harmoniously, but with a chaotic energy that made it endlessly fascinating and often dangerous. This wasn't a place of polite segregation. It was a rough, vital common ground where the boundaries between lord and peasant, soldier and merchant, blurred under the influence of cheap ale and shared human needs. You'd see a grimy, mud-splattered farmer fresh from the fields, nursing a tankard of small beer just a few feet away from a knight. His armor, or at least his best leather jerkin freshly polished, loudly boasting of a recent skirmish. This mix created a volatile, unpredictable atmosphere. On one hand, it fostered an odd sort of momentary equality. A man with a fat purse might find himself sharing a bench with a man who hadn't seen a full meal in days, both drawn by the promise of warmth, ale, and perhaps a scrap of news. But this fragile truce could shatter in an instant. A careless bump, a misspoken word, or a perceived slight could quickly escalate into a brutal fight. where social standing might offer little protection against a farmer's desperate fury or a soldier's practiced brutality. The innkeeper, a figure of authority in his own right, often had to navigate these shifting tides, sometimes acting as a mediator, sometimes as a bouncer, and always with an eye on his profits and his skin. The convergence of classes meant a constant exchange of information, however unreliable. A traveling merchant might overhear a local peasant grumbling about poor harvest yields, valuable information for his next trade deal. A soldier on leave might share exaggerated tales of faraway battles, listened to eagerly by villagers hungry for news from beyond their tiny world. It was a chaotic marketplace of ideas, rumors, and half-truths, all bouncing off the smoke-stained walls. This dynamic environment forced everyone to be constantly alert, reading body language, listening for subtle cues, and assessing potential threats or opportunities from every corner of the crowded room. You quickly learn to distinguish between a genuine traveler seeking rest and a lurking ruffian seeking easy prey. Humor, too, was often tied to the dissemination of news, albeit with a sharp edge. You might hear a grimy peasant, his voice thick with awe, loudly complaining that his favorite goat, Bessie, likely offers better personal hygiene than the Lord himself, eliciting nervous chuckles from those around him. Or a weathered soldier, wiping oil from his beard, declaring that the only thing worse than a battle axe is a weak, old turnip stew, a sentiment widely understood and appreciated by the tavern's patrons. These moments of levity were fleeting, quickly swallowed by the general din, but they served as small, vital releases in a life otherwise defined by struggle. The tavern was a microcosm of medieval society, a place where the harsh realities of class were temporarily suspended, only to return with even greater force the moment you stepped back out into the cold, dark night. It was a melting pot, often boiling over, but always essential. In the bustling, often chaotic heart of the medieval tavern, the exchange of stories and news wasn't a leisurely pastime. It was a high-stakes, fast-paced acquisition of vital information, a literal lifeline in a world without printing presses or reliable postal services. The tavern was the internet of its age, constantly buzzing with updates, rumors, and half-truths, all delivered by wary travelers and gossiping locals. You learn quickly to filter the noise, discerning the kernel of truth from the drunken ramblings, because a well-timed piece of news could mean the difference between a profitable journey and a disastrous one, or even life and death. Imagine a group huddled by the smoking hearth, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, as a haggard merchant recounts a tale of bandits on the King's Road, his voice low and urgent. His audience, a mix of curious peasants and wary soldiers, hangs on every word, calculating the risks for their next trip to the market or patrol route. In a flash, this information, once confined to his journey, spreads like wildfire from table to table, transforming from a personal anecdote into actionable intelligence for every traveler in the room. You see a quick glance exchanged between two rough-looking men, suddenly no longer interested in their dice game, their minds clearly calculating new routes or potential ambushes. The arrival of any stranger, particularly a soldier or a merchant, was an event, a sudden influx of fresh tales from the outside world. They brought news of distant battles, of changes in the Lord's taxes, of new trade routes opening or closing, or even just the latest scandalous gossip from the next village over. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were currency. A merchant might trade a piece of valuable news for a better price on aisle, or a soldier might exchange a rumor about troop movements for a warmer spot by the fire. The exchange was rapid, often frantic, as everyone vied to gain an advantage or simply stay informed in an unpredictable world. Humor, too, was often tied to the dissemination of news, albeit with a sharp edge. You might hear a traveler, exasperated by a long journey, declare that the only thing faster than a royal messenger is a tavern rumor about a spilled pint, or a local peasant might sarcastically note that the latest news from the capital arrived slower than a snail crossing a frozen marsh. But the gossip about who stole Farmer Giles's prized chicken spread through the village before the chicken even hit the pot. These quick, in-world jabs provided a momentary release of tension, a shared acknowledgement of the absurdities and hardships of their interconnected lives. The innkeeper, always listening, was a master of information arbitrage. He knew which stories held value, which rumors were likely to escalate into trouble, and which travelers were worth cultivating for their knowledge. He was the hub, the central switchboard through which all these narratives flowed. His casual nod or subtle shift in attention could indicate the importance of a whispered conversation. The tavern itself became a living, breathing newspaper, its pages constantly rewritten by the influx of new faces and fresh tales, ensuring that nothing stayed secret for long and that everyone, for better or worse, was always just one earshot away from the next unfolding drama. The innkeeper of a medieval tavern wasn't just a simple barkeep. They were the eye of the storm, the central figure navigating the constant shifts in mood and the ever-present threat of trouble. Imagine a person with the shrewdness of a merchant, the patience of a saint mostly, and the physical presence of a well-built bouncer, all rolled into one. Their role was paramount to the tavern's survival and, by extension, to their own livelihood. They were the ultimate multi-taskers, pouring all, collecting coins, settling disputes, and listening to every whisper that passed through the smoke-filled air, all while keeping a watchful eye on every patron. You see the innkeeper, a robust figure with calloused hands and a perpetual frown etched into their face, moving with a surprising agility through the crowded room. They carry a heavy wooden paddle, not just for stirring the ale, but as a silent, ever-present threat to anyone thinking of causing too much trouble. They greet new arrivals with a curt nod, their eyes quickly assessing the traveler's wary posture, the quality of their clothes, and the potential weight of their purse. There's a subtle flick of their wrist as they wipe down a table, a motion that seems casual but misses nothing. They know which patrons are likely to start a fight, which ones are good for a few extra coppers, and which ones are just passing through, harmless but easily forgotten. It's a constant, rapid assessment, vital for maintaining order and maximizing profit. Their humor is as dry as old kindling, often delivered with a straight face and a glint in their eye. They might quip about a particularly loud patron's snoring echoing through the whole village, or remark that a certain type of ale has been known to give even the hardiest knight the strength of a particularly stubborn donkey. These sarcastic comments are rarely meant to truly offend, but rather to diffuse tension or subtly remind everyone who truly holds the power in this establishment. It's a delicate dance between maintaining an air of authority and encouraging enough revelry to keep the ale flowing and the coin jingling. The innkeeper is also the primary source of basic provisions for weary travelers, offering not just ale, but often a simple meal and a place to rest your head, usually on a straw mattress in a shared room, or, if you were lucky, in the stable with the livestock. They are the purveyors of fleeting comfort in a harsh world, and they extract a price for it, both in coin and in unspoken rules of conduct. You learn quickly that arguing with the innkeeper is rarely a good idea. They are well connected within the local community and have the means to make a traveler's life even more difficult, perhaps even sending word ahead to the next village about an unruly patron. As the night progresses, the innkeeper's vigilance never wavers. They are the last to turn in, meticulously banking the fire to keep the embers alive until morning, a vital task that ensures the tavern's warmth and the continuity of its chaotic heart. They are the quiet sentinels of the night, ensuring that despite the brawls and the drunken boasts, the tavern lives to see another day, ready to absorb the next wave of tired travelers, hopeful gamblers, and eager rumor mongers. The innkeeper is the bedrock of this transient world, holding it all together with a watchful eye and a firm hand. For the wary traveler and the shrewd merchant, medieval taverns were not merely places for revelry, but essential, albeit often dangerous, pit stops along brutal journeys. Imagine you are one such traveler, your clothes thick with road dust and your muscles aching from days on horseback or trudging through muddy paths. As you step into the tavern, the immediate warmth and the promise of a roof over your head are a stark luxury compared to the biting cold or damp of the open road. But this respite is rarely peaceful. It's a brief, tense interlude before the next leg of your perilous trip. Travelers and traders poured into taverns from all directions, carrying news, goods, and often trouble. A merchant might be guarding a precious cargo of silks or spices, making him a prime target for the less savory elements who frequented such establishments. A soldier, returning from a distant campaign, might be carrying news of a victory or defeat, information that could shift local politics or spark a rebellion. The tavern became a temporary melting pot of information and opportunity, where a sharp ear could pick up valuable intelligence, or a careless word could lead to a swift, unfortunate end. You learned to keep one eye on your purse and the other on anyone who seemed too interested in your business. The interactions were often quick, transactional, and tinged with suspicion. A tired pilgrim might barter a small, blessed trinket for a night's lodging, while a cynical trader might attempt to unload questionable goods on an unsuspecting local. Every conversation was a negotiation, every shared drink a potential alliance or a test of loyalty. You'd see a small group huddle in a corner, their voices low, arranging a deal for stolen livestock or a quick exchange of coin for passage through dangerous territory. These were fleeting partnerships, formed out of necessity and dissolved the moment the ink, or rather, the spoken word was dry. The hum of languages you couldn't quite understand would fill the air, a reminder of the vast, interconnected, yet perilous world outside. Perhaps a merchant speaking in a guttural northern tongue negotiates with a southerner whose accent is softer, almost musical. It's a testament to the sheer volume of travel in this era, despite the constant dangers. The innkeeper, a master of these transient interactions, would move between groups, a silent sentinel absorbing information, assessing intentions, and ensuring that no one overstayed their welcome or caused too much irreparable damage before paying their dues. He might even act as an informal broker, connecting a traveler with a need to a local, with a service, always for a cut of the deal, of course. The quick nature of these stops meant little time for deep connections. Friendships were forged in the heat of a shared meal or a successful gamble, only to be broken by the next morning's journey. You might share a laugh with a stranger over a particularly bad batch of ale, or witness a quick, brutal fight over a miscounted coin, knowing that by dawn, both the friend and the fighter would be gone, replaced by new faces and new stories. The tavern was a fleeting moment of contact in a world of constant motion, a brief, bright flash of human interaction before the long, silent road called once more. It was a vital link in the chain of medieval travel, a place where people paused, took risks, gathered intelligence, and then, swiftly, moved on. The atmosphere within a medieval tavern, though often boisterous, was a thin veneer over a constant undercurrent of danger, where casual arguments could escalate into swift, brutal conflicts in a matter of heartbeats. There was an ever-present hum of potential violence, a silent expectation that at any moment the jovial mood could shatter, replaced by the clash of fists, the glint of steel, or the thud of a body hitting the dirt floor. This wasn't some fantasy nightly duel. This was raw, desperate, and often messy violence, a quick and dirty resolution to a brewing conflict. You learn to read the room quickly, assessing the subtle cues, a hand lingering too long near a belt pouch, an eye that follows a stranger with too much intensity, a sudden, sharp silence that descends on a group. These are the red flags, the tiny indicators that a quick brawl is about to erupt. It could be over anything: a perceived insult, a cheating accusation during a dice game, or simply too much cheap ale loosening tongues and shortening tempers. The causes were often petty, but the consequences could be severe, leaving a man with more than just a hangover, perhaps a broken nose, a missing tooth, or a more permanent injury. Imagine a scene unfolding before you two men, their voices rising in a heated argument over a disputed debt. One moment they're merely shouting, the next, a tankard flies through the air, shattering against the wall, and they're lunging at each other. The space, already cramped, becomes a whirlwind of flailing limbs and desperate grunts. Others might scatter, or some, emboldened by drink, might join the fray, turning a two-man squabble into a chaotic free-for-all. You notice how swiftly the knives appear, not always drawn to kill, but certainly to threaten, to carve a quick advantage in the swirling chaos. It's a terrifyingly efficient escalation, a brutal dance of survival. The innkeeper, always observing, would intervene only when absolutely necessary, often with a well-aimed cudgel, or the threat of calling the local guard, a prospect nearly as undesirable as the fight itself. His goal wasn't justice, but the preservation of his property and the swift restoration of order, because a prolonged brawl could ruin business for the night. You'd hear his booming voice cut through the clamor, demanding payment for any shattered benches or spilled ale, even before the fighters had picked themselves up from the floor. Humor, in these tense moments, was often a coping mechanism, a dark, gallows-type wit. A scruffy patron might lean over to you, a grin plastered on his face, and whisper, "Well, at least now we know that the new aisle isn't so weak after all," as two men tumble over a table, fueled by the very brew you're sipping. Or you might hear a sarcastic comment about how the tavern's patrons provided better entertainment than any traveling jester, with the added benefit of live special effects. These quick, cynical remarks acknowledge the grim reality of violence, while simultaneously trying to lighten the mood. Or perhaps just to cope with the stress of witnessing yet another unpredictable explosion of temper. The medieval tavern, despite its comforts, was a microcosm of a brutal world, reminding you that even in moments of rest, danger was always just a heartbeat away. The medieval tavern, far from being a quiet place for reflection, was a churning cauldron of whispers, half-truths, and outright fabrications, serving as the primary conduit for local gossip and rumors to spread like wildfire. In a world starved for reliable information, every new face and every overheard conversation became a potential source of news, however distorted. You quickly learn that what starts as a hushed whisper by the hearth can, within minutes, become a booming declaration at the central table, gaining embellishments and exaggerations with every retelling. This rapid, often inaccurate, dissemination of news could reshape reputations, trigger feuds, or even influence decisions far beyond the tavern's smoky walls. Imagine a group of women huddled near the entrance, ostensibly sharing a jug of ale, but their eyes are darting, their voices low and urgent. One might lean in close, a hand cupped around her mouth, to whisper about how Farmer Giles's eldest daughter was seen speaking with a mysterious stranger from the next village. A seemingly innocent detail that, by the time it reaches the far end of the room, transforms into a full-blown elopement scheme. The speed at which these snippets of local life morph into dramatic sagas is astonishing, and you quickly learn that true events are often far less interesting than the stories they inspire. The innkeeper, a master of observing human nature, often used this flow of gossip to his advantage. He knew which rumors would attract more patrons, keen to hear the latest scandal, and which ones needed to be subtly quashed before they led to actual trouble, like a public accusation of theft or witchcraft. He might even strategically drop a tantalizing half-truth to steer conversation in a certain direction, ensuring that his tavern remained the most vibrant and thus the most profitable hub of local interaction. His casual remarks, seemingly innocent, were often carefully calculated to fuel the rumor mill just enough to keep things interesting without causing irreparable damage. Humor, in this environment, was a double-edged sword, often used to either subtly spread a rumor or to mock one. You might hear a patron, after listening to an outlandish tale about a local lord's secret gold, loudly declare that the only gold he'd ever seen was the color of stale ale, drawing knowing chuckles from those who appreciated the cynicism. Or a seasoned traveler might muse aloud that the speed of a tavern rumor about a pig escaping is far greater than the speed of any official messenger about a new tax. A common truth that resonates deeply with everyone present. These quick, sharp observations cut through the noise, highlighting the often absurd reality of their information ecosystem. For those whose lives were rooted in the village, the tavern was their social network, their newspaper, and their soap opera all rolled into one. Here they learned who was marrying whom, who was sick, who was prospering, and who was facing hardship. This rapid, unfiltered exchange of personal stories and village news created a strong, if sometimes invasive, sense of community. But for the transient traveler, it offered a fleeting glimpse into the intricate web of local life, a quick download of the human drama that unfolded in every corner of the medieval world, reminding you that even in the most isolated village, life was rarely dull, and secrets, no matter how well guarded, rarely stayed secret for long within the lively confines of the tavern. Medieval taverns, typically already bursting with raucous energy, transformed into even more intense, fleeting spectacles during seasonal celebrations and holidays. These were not quiet, reflective moments. They were sudden, explosive bursts of revelry, a desperate attempt to momentarily cast off the ceaseless grind of medieval life. Imagine the atmosphere during a harvest festival. The usual din of the tavern intensifies tenfold as villagers pour in, their faces flushed with the thrill of good crops and the promise of a brief respite from endless labor. The air, already thick with smoke and all, now carries the earthy scent of fresh straw brought in for improvised seating and the richer aroma of a rare roasted pig or goose. The all flowed even more freely, poured with a speed that mirrored the desperate thirst for celebration. Tankards were slammed down with greater gusto, and laughter erupted in louder, more unrestrained peals. These were nights for excess, for abandoning the usual strictures of sobriety and decorum. You'd see peasants and townsfolk, usually burdened by hard work, dancing clumsily on tables, their heavy boots thudding against the scarred wood. The rough, improvised music of pipes and lutes would play continuously, often drowned out by collective, off-key singing that echoed through the small, crowded space. It was a chaotic, joyful release, a collective exhale from the pressures of survival. Special dishes, rare and anticipated, might make a fleeting appearance. Perhaps a whole roasted animal, its skin crackling and glistening with fat, was carved and distributed amongst the patrons, a luxurious treat compared to the usual watery pottage. The smell of roasted meat, a rare delight, would momentarily overpower the usual tavern odors, drawing everyone closer like moths to a particularly delicious flame. These were moments to feast, to temporarily forget the ever-present hunger, and to indulge in flavors that would not be tasted again until the next such occasion. These celebrations, however, were often short-lived and intense, almost as if medieval life itself was too impatient to allow for prolonged joy. They were brief, potent explosions of communal spirit before the inevitable return to arduous daily routines. The energy was frenetic, a desperate attempt to cram as much pleasure, as much warmth, and as much forgetfulness into a single night as possible. Fights, too, could erupt with even greater ferocity during these times, fueled by heightened emotions and copious amounts of awe. A drunken insult, easily overlooked on an ordinary night, could escalate into a swift, brutal brawl, adding another layer of chaotic drama to the festive atmosphere. The innkeeper, despite the increased workload, would be in their element, overseeing the expanded revelry with a sharp eye for profit and a ready hand for intervention. They understood that these celebrations, while chaotic, were essential to the rhythm of medieval life, and thus to their business. They would navigate the swirling mass of bodies, delivering overflowing tankards with remarkable speed, their face a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction as they watched the coins pile up. These special nights, brief and intense, were a vivid testament to the enduring human need for celebration, even in the harshest of times, turning the humble tavern into a temporary, roaring beacon of defiant joy before the long, silent stretch of ordinary life resumed. As the long medieval night drew to a close in the tavern, the boisterous energy didn't simply fade. It transformed into a series of rituals, some tired, some hurried, and all signaling the transition from communal chaos back to individual vulnerability. This wasn't a gentle winding down, it was often an abrupt shift, akin to a stage curtain falling with a thud, leaving everyone to quickly decide their next move. The call for "last ale" would echo through the smoky room, delivered by the innkeeper with a finality that brooked no argument, a stark reminder that the fleeting comfort of the tavern was nearly over. You'd see patrons scrambling to drain their tankards, their voices growing hoarser, a desperate attempt to squeeze the last drops of warmth and camaraderie from the night. The games of dice, once boisterous and lively, would become quicker, more desperate, as gamblers tried to reclaim their losses or secure a final lucky win before the light faded completely. The faint strumming of a lute might cease abruptly, its player packing away their instrument with a weary sigh. Knowing the time for performance was done, the air itself seemed to grow heavier as the lingering scent of stale ale and wood smoke settled, no longer invigorated by the press of new bodies or the promise of fresh pours. For those with a few coppers to spare, the closing time meant a quick scramble for a spot on a communal straw mattress upstairs, if such a luxury was even available. Others, without coin or inclination, would simply melt back into the night, vanishing into the dark, narrow streets, perhaps seeking shelter in a stable, a deserted barn, or simply huddling in a doorway against the biting cold. The departure was often swift and unceremonious, a mass exodus as the heavy wooden door creaked open and shut, letting in a final, chilling gust of wind. The innkeeper, a figure of silent authority, would oversee this dispersal with a watchful eye, collecting the last of the coins, ensuring no one made off with a stray tankard or a piece of his battered furniture. His movements would become more deliberate, his gaze sharper, as he checked for any lingering troublemakers or those too drunk to move. He might offer a final, gruff warning to a particularly rowdy patron about keeping quiet on the street, or simply watch them stumble out into the darkness, a silent prayer that they wouldn't attract the attention of the local guard, whose presence meant trouble for everyone. The jokes, if any, during this final act were often cynical, born of exhaustion. A slurring patron might loudly wonder if the sun ever actually bothered to rise in this part of the world, or if they were doomed to an eternity of darkness and stale ale. Someone else might quip that at least they wouldn't have to worry about missing breakfast, since it would probably be the same pottage from last night, just colder. These were shared moments of dark humor, a final, wary acknowledgement of the harsh realities that awaited them beyond the tavern's quickly fading warmth. As the last patrons departed, leaving only the lingering smell of human bodies and fermented grain, the tavern would finally fall silent, its lively pulse replaced by the slow, quiet crackle of dying embers. A temporary stillness before the dawn brought a new day, and a new wave of desperate souls, eager to fill its walls with noise and life once more. The medieval tavern, despite its humble and often grimy appearance, left an indelible mark on the fabric of society, extending far beyond its physical walls and into the enduring legacy of human social interaction. It wasn't just a place to drink, it was a microcosm of medieval life, a crucible where community was forged, information was exchanged, and the harsh realities of existence were momentarily defied through shared experience. The very rhythms of medieval life, from the weary traveler seeking a fleeting moment of warmth to the local peasant desperate for a morsel of gossip, were inextricably linked to these lively, chaotic hubs. The lasting impact of taverns is evident in their fundamental role as communication centers. In a world without widespread literacy or rapid transit, these establishments were the beating heart of news dissemination, however unreliable. They were where information, from royal decrees to local scandals, transformed from whispers into widespread knowledge, shaping public opinion and influencing individual decisions. This vital function laid a groundwork for future public spaces, showing how communal gathering points could serve as essential conduits for social cohesion and the sharing of critical, if not always accurate, data. It proved that human connection, even amid smoke and all, was a powerful force for collective understanding. Moreover, taverns provided an essential, if temporary, escape valve from the relentless pressures of medieval life. For a brief period, the rigid social hierarchies could blur, allowing lords and peasants to share the same rough benches, united by the common need for sustenance, warmth, and a moment of forgetfulness. These fleeting moments of shared humanity, punctuated by loud laughter and boisterous songs, were vital for maintaining morale in a brutal world. They demonstrated the enduring human need for communal celebration and provided a collective outlet for the stresses of hard labor and constant danger, allowing people to momentarily shed their burdens before facing another day. The raw, unfiltered humor born within these walls, often dark and cynical, also speaks to a resilient human spirit. The quick, cutting jokes about turnips and taxes, while seemingly simple, were powerful tools for coping with hardship and fostering a sense of shared experience. They were a testament to the ability of people to find levity, even in the grimmest of circumstances, reminding you that even when life handed them only discomfort, they could still find a way to laugh. This brand of humor, born from necessity, forged a unique bond among patrons, creating a sense of solidarity against the outside world. Ultimately, the medieval tavern wasn't merely a building, it was an institution, a dynamic force that shaped social norms, facilitated commerce, and provided a vital space for human connection in a fragmented world. Its raw energy, its fleeting comforts, and its ever-present dangers created a unique blend of experiences that left an indelible mark on the lives of those who frequented its smoky interior. The spirit of the medieval tavern, that chaotic mix of desperation, community, and defiant joy, continues to echo through history, reminding us of a time when every gathering was an adventure, every conversation a potential story, and every sip of ale a small victory against the relentless march of time. Its legacy endures, a testament to the enduring human need for connection, even when it's found amidst the clatter, the stench, and the occasional brawl.